Hello,
Hi, Hannah.
how are you today?
I am good. I am so ready to talk about our subject today. I'm very excited.
Me too, it's my favorite.
It's a hard subject,
It is.
but I would say that from the beginning, from the very inception of KK9 dog training until now, I would say at least half of our clients get in touch with us because of reactivity. Would you agree?
Yeah, at the very least.
At
Yep.
the very least, could be
Mhm.
more.
Yeah. The majority of my clients right now are struggling with reactivity in some fashion. So it's a very common problem that we have with our dogs, but um, we can help, which is great too.
We absolutely can. And for me, when I started training with my reactive dog before I ever became a dog trainer, the fact that I found out what it was even called
Yeah.
helped me. When I found out that his barking and lunging and growling had a name, and that name was reactivity, and more specifically, leash reactivity, it was a huge breath of fresh air that it, I didn't have a broken dog.
Right.
There was just, he just needed help.
Yeah, he just needs help. I think it's always a good thing to remind people too, is that you're not alone in this case. Like there's so many dogs struggling. Not every dog can walk on a leash, and not every dog watches the mailman go by peacefully. And there's so many things. You're not
I
alone. So,
I always felt like, okay, I see these dogs walking by their owner's side, and my dog can't do that. And so, what's wrong with my dog? And what I
right.
discovered after I became a trainer was the reason I wasn't seeing those dogs that couldn't do it is because they weren't out because it was too
Right.
hard.
Yes. Much too hard for many dogs to do that. And that's so true. You see all these lovely dogs walking around doing a great job, but it's hard to walk a reactive dog. So why would you put you or your dog through that until you have the tools to make it better for everybody else?
And the good news is there are tools.
Yeah, there are lots. We can help with that too. So you touched on it a little bit, but maybe we can talk about what reactivity is in general and what it could look like. You said in your case, your dog was barking, growling, lunging, things of that nature. But what
Yes.
else can it look like?
It can look like aggression.
Yeah,
It
absolutely
can,
can.
of course, barking, lunging, growling does look like aggression. So it can look like aggression. It can look like fear.
Hmm.
It can look like nervousness, anxiety.
Right.
It can, excuse me, it can look like anything that anything that is an emotional reaction that doesn't really fit what's going on.
Right. Hmm. Big feelings that don't make sense to us in the situation. But of course, they make a lot of sense to our dog in that moment. So we have to try to understand why they're feeling that way.
Looking from a human standpoint, I, as some people know that I teach human children, um, and I can think specifically right now of a student that I have who is reactive to to environments where there's a lot of sound.
Mhm.
Well, since there's a lot of sound in my classroom, this student has developed strategies that help her get through.
Right.
And it's neat to see her implementing the strategies that she's learned
Yeah.
because she loves music, she loves my classroom, but she has to have strategies to help her get through when maybe there's drums playing or maybe
Hmm.
there are other instruments that are playing and the noise level is too much for her. It doesn't mean that she's broken. It doesn't
No.
mean that she is a bad student, but she's learned strategies to help her cope. And we
Yeah,
can do the same thing for our dogs.
we definitely can. I love putting these behavior problems in the context of humans because it's so much easier to relate to. So just like you said, your kiddos have that. There's lots of people who struggle with all sorts of things in the world, sights, sounds, noises, specific environments. And we can give
Smells.
smells, yeah. And we offer
Yes,
all these tools for these people, but when we put it in the context of a dog, it's often like, well, my dog's being bad. No, your dog is struggling. Let's help them get through these things.
absolutely. Absolutely. I discovered a veterinary behaviorist. I was watching a movie that actually that was based on, it's a documentary based on the work of Dr. Aaron, about the highly sensitive person. Lots of people know about her work, about the highly sensitive
Mhm.
person. And I copied a quote from this veterinary behaviorist who's also a researcher in Switzerland. And one piece of information that came up in this documentary was that research has shown that 20% of people and animals, not just people, but animals, are highly, what we would term highly sensitive. And so that has served evolutionary, speaking from an evolutionary standpoint, that's a good thing, because if you're highly sensitive to your environment, you're going to be aware of predators, you're going to be aware
Right.
of danger. And so being highly sensitive from an evolutionary standpoint is not a bad thing. And so this is what research has told us. And so this veterinary behaviorist, her name is Dr. Maya Brame Dubé, and she is at the University of Switzerland, Bern University in Switzerland. She says, and she was talking for this quote, so it's not grammatically the best because she was just kind of talking like
Yeah.
we're talking. But she says, I see in my behavior practice how often animals are not understood in their needs and they're suffering.
Yeah. They are suffering.
And that really hit me.
Yeah.
And she mentioned the environment, and she said that when we don't recognize that the animal is struggling in their environment and we don't adjust for their struggle in the environment, then we just set them up for failure.
Right. I always like to think about it when my clients are struggling on a walk and their dog is having a huge reactive moment to a dog behind the fence or a squirrel running away or whatever it may be. It's like, how do you feel right now? Because this is hard for you. Imagine how hard it is for your dog. Your dog is struggling and suffering through this, just like you're struggling. So we can make it better for everybody if we frame it in the sense that it's going to be better for all of us if we can have tools for this.
Absolutely. And we love that quote. Your dog is not giving you a hard time. Your dog is having a hard time.
Yes, they are having a hard time. Yeah. It's so nice to frame it in the sense of we're helping our dog get through this. We're helping them learn that this is a safe place. We're helping them learn that we can do things that are outside of their comfort zone or whatever it may be.
I was just thinking about something that happened with my dog walker that comes in when I'm
Yeah,
away during the day. She's a lovely young woman, but um, my dog Chewy is not what I would call a reactive dog, but he does have reactions to certain things in the environment. Wind
right.
is one of them. If it's very windy, he's very anxious. And
Yeah,
there was a point in time where we had a lot of wind. And so the dog walker came, and the message that I got was Chewy was giving me a hard time about going for a walk. And I wanted to make sure that we didn't get into a loop of her thinking that Chewy was giving her a hard time. So I talked to the owner of the business and I said, let's make a plan
yeah,
so that we don't get into a loop where the walker thinks that Chewy's giving her a hard time. So what we did was reframe the visit. And she came and she didn't try to walk for a few days
right.
and just met Chewy where he was and gave him what he needed indoors, and then started back to work up toward the walk. Because what would happen is if she kept trying to get him to go on a walk and set up this loop where their relationship became a struggle,
Yeah,
then it would be just a black hole.
Right, right. Never
And so what
ends.
happens with our reactive dogs is if we treat it as a behavior and we treat it as my dog is giving me a hard time on a walk, my dog is lunging on a walk, he's giving me a hard time. Then if we're trying to correct a problem, instead of stepping back and reframing it, then it becomes a black hole.
Right, yeah. People often think like my dog just needs to be exposed to other dogs more on the walk. So we're just gonna take more walks, keep seeing more dogs, but your dog is constantly practicing these behaviors and practicing lunging and barking and pulling and spinning on the leash or all of these scary things. And the more they practice it, it's just the more they're gonna do it. Period.
Absolutely. It becomes a loop.
Right. So we have to break that loop. Yeah.
I love the concept of going back to zero.
Yeah,
I,
me too.
I believe in it so much. I believe that when something isn't working, it's time to stop
Hmm.
and go
Take a break.
back to zero
Yes.
and do things differently moving ahead.
Yeah.
It's that old saying, if we do what we've always done, we'll get what we've always done.
Yeah, it's so true.
And it is true. It is true. So when we're looking at our dogs, sometimes just stopping
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
going back to square one.
Right. And the sense of leash reactivity, taking a break from your walks, not only is it great for the dog, of course, but think about the relief that you can get from that as the dog guardian. The owner is just like, today I don't have to worry about my dog barking at other dogs. Today I don't have to worry about being pulled down on the leash. It's a relief for people too. And people don't always understand that. So it's always a good thing to remember that when your dog is struggling, you're struggling, everybody needs a break. You probably feel like you need a break. Take the break.
Absolutely. And in the hierarchy of exercise, walking is pretty far down.
Right. Yeah.
It's fine. It's a good activity,
Mhm.
but it's not really what provides exercise for our dog anyway. So if
Right.
we're concerned about exercise, there's other ways to get exercise.
Mhm.
And if people need ideas, please reach out. You know, we can help you with ideas. We're not going to get into that on this call, but we can certainly help with ideas of how to get exercise. But in that hierarchy, walking is not high on the list.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of talked about how dogs have leash reactivity, but talk about some other types of reactivity that we might see and how that can relate to barriers in our dogs' lives and all of that.
Um, a lot of times with, of course, visual
Mhm.
stimulation for
Right.
some dogs is, as far as reactivity, we kind of need to look at the senses.
Yep.
So there's, visual, there's auditory, there's definitely olfactory things. I mean,
Yes.
dog noses are so sensitive and they could be reacting to something that we would never, ever be
Yeah.
privy to with our sense of smell.
Right.
It might be very aversive to them.
Hmm.
Um, and and touch. I mean, if a dog is if their paws are sensitive on a certain area that we're walking, that can be a problem. I think
Right.
sometimes people don't realize how hot or how cold their
Yeah.
dog's paws get.
Hmm.
Um, and so if we're looking from a sensory standpoint, maybe your dog tends to be tends to react more to what they see in the environment.
Yep.
Maybe it's moving things. Maybe it's birds.
Yeah.
Maybe it's people walking down the street. If it's auditory, maybe it's the sound of the wind. For my dog, the sound of the wind, that's the worst thing that can happen to him,
Hmm.
which, you know, many dogs don't even notice.
Right. Yeah. For
If,
Finn, the sound of the train going by is his biggest trigger.
yeah. And you can't prevent that.
No, definitely not.
I can't prevent the wind.
No,
So
yeah.
then we'd have to have strategies. So
Right, exactly.
what do you do for Finn when the trains come by?
I just try to redirect him with a delicious piece of food and talk to him about the train, and it's gonna go away, and we'll move on with our day.
That Mr. Rogers.
Exactly. Yep. It's just a train, bud. It's okay. Nice, calm, sing-songy tone. And if everybody in the house can implement that calm tone, then it helps our dogs like settle into it a little bit too. Okay, it's just a train. I'll take some cheese and move on.
And that's why Mr. Rogers talked to children the way that he did,
Right, right.
was to normalize the environment. Sometimes the
Mhm.
world is a scary place,
Yeah,
especially for animals and children who don't have a big picture of what's
mhm,
going on. And by talking through, even if our dogs don't understand the actual words that we're
right.
saying, they understand our tone of voice, they understand the emotion that is behind it.
Yep.
And so the Mr. Rogers voice, that is one of the best things that we can do for dogs that are having a hard time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy how much it works too, because not that I was ever, I just started doing it one day. I was like, we're going to do this now. When Finn barks, we're going to talk about it in that nice tone. And within a few days, he noticed, he started looking at me when I talked that way. And he was like, oh, okay. It's almost like you can see him like, all right, well, I guess we're done with this now. Moving on. And it's so cool
And
how it
if my
works.
person is calm about it,
Yeah, exactly.
that then maybe I can be calm about it.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
my so again to the point of dogs might not understand the actual words. So let's think about the flip side of that. If the dog hears something outside and person is bothered by the dog's barking and yells and says,
yeah.
"Stop barking. There's nothing out there. Stop barking." All that does is tell the dog, "Okay, I thought there was something bad. My person is upset, so sure enough, it
Something is
must be
bad.
bad."
Mm-hmm. Yep. I always feel like I'm barking back at him when he's he's outside yelling at or barking, and I yell at him, "Finn, stop barking." He's like, "Oh, she's barking too, so I gotta keep barking."
Right. Or she's upset, so there must be something
Exactly.
that is
Right.
worrisome.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. Do our do you think our dogs are cured from reactivity?
No, I think they're not. There's no cure for this type of stuff. If we can put it in the context of humans again too, is there really a cure for anxiety, ADHD? No, but we have lots of things we can do to help people manage these struggles. So we offer the same thing for our dogs. We're not going to ever cure them from being worried about the train or other dogs. We're just going to help them manage those behaviors and learn to do other things when they see other dogs and that type of stuff. What do you think?
Well, I agree 1,000%. But one other interesting thing that came out of this documentary that I was watching was that Elaine Ahrens, who wrote about the highly sensitive
Hmm.
person, she does not consider high sensitivity in people or animals to be a pathology or an illness
Right.
or a disease. It's something that is a personality trait of 20% of human and animal populations. And again, we're not saying that sensitivity equals reactivity, but certainly sensitivity and reactivity go together. Because if you
Right.
are processing everything in your environment at a higher level, if your nervous system is affected to a greater degree by what you sense, what you see, what you
Hmm.
smell, what you hear, what you taste, what you touch, then it stands to reason that if you're processing it more deeply, your reactions to it will be more pronounced.
Absolutely.
So if it's not a pathology,
Hmm.
then do we need to cure it?
No, definitely not.
So there, there's that side of it. And of course, it would be nice if every dog was an easy dog. But
Hmm.
guess what? Every person isn't an easy person.
Exactly. Right.
Every child isn't an easy child. It doesn't mean that they need to be fixed, but they need to be supported.
Yeah, exactly. And oftentimes reactivity has such a negative connotation because as humans, we think like my dog's pulling, lunging, barking, all these things that we perceive as not good behaviors. Um, but it's not. Our dogs are sentient beings. We want them to respond to the world. That we want to take them on walks and let them get sniffs and see people and do all these things. So we don't think it's a bad thing, but we do want to help them when they're struggling with those big emotions. So if we can reframe it off of my dog as being bad, like your dog is struggling and it's the way they are, it's their personality, like we're saying. So why don't we just help them through it?
And if they don't have any reactions, if they're
Yeah.
sentient beings, they're going to have reactions to their
Yes.
environment. There's going
Yep.
to be some sort of response. If not, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
If not,
Majorly.
they're shut down.
Yeah.
And so if their emotions are big, their
Mhm.
feelings are big, that's okay. But if that leads to behaviors that maybe aren't safe for them or safe
Mhm.
for someone else, then of course we need to help them with
Right.
an alternative behavior.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's very doable.
It is. Yeah. It is doable.
Well, this, even though, we could talk about this literally all day long, and I think that we probably should have another conversation. I think I would love to invite maybe a client on to
Yeah, that'd be
do a
fun.
conversation about maybe their journey
Hmm.
with a reactive
Yeah,
dog.
that'd be great.
And I would love to revisit this conversation, but this is probably a lot for one conversation
That's fair.
already.
Yeah, that's true.
So
We've covered a lot of good things.
yeah, this is such a good topic and um so relevant for so
It
many
is.
people.
I think we do have to touch on how reactivity training is so much more than taking treats on a walk or having
Oh,
treats when your dog
yes.
barks. This is a lifestyle, just like with all dog training. But, if your dog is struggling, why you have to try to help them as much as you can. And that means all day you have treats in your pockets, or you're just changing your whole life to help your dog. And it's not a huge, hard change. We just have to remember that it's not twice a week you're training your dog on reactivity. It's your whole life with your dog. That's always a good reminder too in general, because we can't we see your dog once a week. We're not going to be able to help them get over this once a week. But you live with your dog, so you have all these pockets of time to be working with your dog.
I'm so glad that you mentioned the treat thing and how a lot of times people struggle with that piece of the
Yeah.
training. Like, why do I have to use food? Why do I have to have food all the time? Um, One thing, and we're not going to we can have a whole conversation on that, and we
Yeah,
probably
we
will.
know.
But there's one really interesting thing that I heard on Cog Dog Radio, which is a great podcast, about eating. If the dog can eat in the presence of something that is bothering them or causing them big feelings, that's actually
Mhm.
such good information for us.
Yes,
If the
absolutely.
dog can't eat, then we know they are really, really in a bad place.
Yep.
But the dog's ability to eat, eating as a behavior, is a huge piece of information that we need.
We do need that for sure. It gives us so much information on how your dog is feeling and how they're able to learn in that exact moment. So it is very important to know if your dog can eat in these hard moments.
Absolutely. If, since they can't talk to us,
Right.
that is that's one of the easiest ways for them to communicate with us. If
Mhm.
they are completely gone,
Right.
if it is so scary that they're completely gone, or they just need some support. If they can eat in that moment, then we can work through.
Right.
If they can't eat in that moment, then we have to have ways to get out of Dodge. But
Yeah.
when we can, help people with those techniques as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, such a good topic. And so many people struggle with this type of stuff. Apparently, 20% of possibly like 20% of dog owners. I mean, I guess all animal population, it might be different, but it is a very common thing. So it's good to know that you're not alone when your dog is pulling and lunging down the street. And there's other people struggling too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Well, I'm excited to do part two of this because
Yeah, me too.
I feel like there's a part two, maybe
There
even a
definitely
part
is.
three.
Yeah. It'd be so fun to bring a client on. That's a great idea. Let's
Yeah,
see what they
yeah.
think.
So clients,
Great.
if you're watching and you want to share your experience,
Yeah,
give us a shout out.
that'd be so fun.
Great. All right,
Perfect.
Hannah, thank you so much for another
Thank
great
you.
conversation. It's always such a pleasure.
Yes, we'll do it again. Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye.